Welcome back to Made for More. I am your host, Holly J. Moore. I am a divorce lawyer on a mission to help you use the adversity in your life to grow and become the best version of yourself. The best version of himself is joining us in studio today. Aaron Bender, hello.
I thought you were going to talk about your dad, who's also joining us in studio today.
I thought you might think that.
Awkward
I
question, though.
Oh,
I completely cut you off.
Yeah, it's okay.
Awkward question. Do you have daddy issues?
I got a lot of issues, but I don't think daddy issues are one of them.
Well, we'll see. We'll see about that.
We'll see. Yeah.
We'll see about that. No. So why? Now, this is one of the perks of having your own podcast. You're like,
Yeah.
I have on who I want to have on.
That's right.
Dad, you're in town. Let's go.
That's right. Exactly. That's pretty much how that went.
What kind of prep have you done for this?
Zero. Yes.
You're like, I've just lived life.
Yeah. I've just grown up as the daughter of an amazing dad. But I was actually driving along one day, and actually, no, this is really what happened. On the radio, they were talking about daddy issues, and I can't even remember really the context of it. But I was thinking, I don't really have those that I'm aware of. Again, like I got lots of issues, but I don't think that is something that, is something that I'm like, having to heal from, and I have trauma from, and, I haven't because one of the things I was thinking about is like, I don't really think I've ever even had like a toxic romantic relationship. Like, I still really adore all of my ex-boyfriends. I'm like in touch with a lot of them. I've represented most of them in their divorce.
No, you haven't.
Yes.
Oh my God.
Yes. And so I'm like, God, how did that happen? How did I, because I still think they're all like amazing human beings. Like none of them are like, oh, I can't believe I was ever with that guy. None of that. So I'm like, how did that happen? And I think partly maybe it was just because I was raised by a dad who some way, somehow raised like a pretty well-adjusted daughter with pretty good like expectations for relationships and men and things like that. Dad, hi.
Hi, Hall.
Welcome. Here we are. Welcome to Made for More.
Well, thanks. I appreciate the invite, and looking forward to this. Not sure what to expect, but let's roll.
Yeah, let's roll. We started to talk a little bit last night, standing in my kitchen, about daddy issues and whatever, and you were starting to say something. I'm like, Dad, wait, no, save it for the camera. But do you even know what daddy issues are?
Well, I didn't until about a week ago.
Okay.
Okay, and
did Mom Google it for you?
Mom Googled it.
Okay.
And kind of enlightened me a little bit as to daddy issues. Okay, I mean everybody seems to have some issues with someone. Okay?
Yeah,
whether
that's
it be
true.
a sibling, a mom or dad, or whatever the case may be. But I never really thought that much about it as far as daddy issues. I would probably call it adjusted or not very well adjusted. You know what I mean? But
so from Mom's Googling of it, and I would assume like you guys maybe discussed it a little bit, what would you say, like when somebody said, because it's kind of become a term in pop culture, society today, like, oh, that person has daddy issues or whatever. So like, what is your understanding of what that might mean?
Well, my understanding of what that might mean would be issues that come up, especially as your child gets into adulthood, because that seems to be the time when things start to kick back into what your childhood was like.
Yeah.
Okay. Not so much when you are growing up, but as
Right.
you become an adult, you seem to, not you, but
Yeah.
people seem to find issues with themselves, and it's easy to pretty much blame somebody for that. Mom and dad have a pretty good target on them for those kinds of things because it's the closest thing to you.
Yeah.
In that, in the growing up process.
Yeah. So when people talk about, like the issues that they're having, in adulthood or whatever, and they're kind of like talking about healing childhood trauma or whatever, like, do you think that's all like BS?
No, but I think they use that as an excuse.
Okay.
In many cases.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think you can use that to your benefit, because you hear people talk about their childhood upbringing. Okay, and well, that's the reason I am the way that that's the reason I am the way I am today. And I think you can use that as a way to be better.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. So back to like the daddy issues specifically, when I think of like daddy issues, I think about, you know, someone who maybe grew up like with a dad that wasn't like present or involved in their life, or maybe, I mean, even just the episode that we shot earlier today, it was an entrepreneur, and we talked about how underneath like every entrepreneur's true motivation, there's like a little bit of anger, or like, I got to prove something to someone.
Yeah.
You can probably relate to that as, you know, a business owner
Approval
yourself.
and different things.
Yeah. So it's like, when I think of daddy issues, I think of like, you know, particularly, and I think I don't think it's gender specific, but I'm a female, a daughter. So, and I think it kind of shows up maybe more in daughters, females. But it's like, your dad wasn't present. Your dad didn't, you know, you don't have high self-esteem. You have issues with self-confidence. You choose toxic relationships. You choose toxic men or toxic partners. That's kind of like what I think about as daddy issues. You're like constantly trying to get the validation or approval of men because that was maybe lacking like in your upbringing. Yeah. So like, that's kind of how I think of daddy issues. I got a lot of issues, but I don't really think I have that type of stuff. So like, when I'm your only daughter, when you like had a daughter and you were raising me, I mean, were you like, I want to be this type of dad, or I want to like, were you intentional about how you fathered me?
I would say very intentional.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Okay.
But no instruction booklet.
Yeah.
Okay. In other words, it's like being in the woods and you know where you want to go from point A to point B, but you're not quite sure how to get there. You made it very easy for us.
Oh,
okay.
Thank you, Dad.
You really did.
I don't think Mom would say the same thing.
No. Okay. I mean,
Mom was like,
it's kind of like the
bitch.
yin yang kind of thing. Okay. In other words, you made it very easy. Okay. And I'm not giving you necessarily that credit, because I believe a lot in DNA. Mm-hmm. Okay. And I mean, we go into these situations with the grace of God and the hope that we're going to make the right decisions at the right time.
Yeah.
We don't always do that. Mm-hmm. You know that as a parent yourself.
Yeah.
It can come back later, and you start to second guess yourself and think, maybe I could have made a different call on that or handle that differently. And Mom and I both have those situations where, well, maybe we should have done it a little different. But we were blessed to have two great kids, and relatively easy. Okay, and I think part of that is, in the DNA. You can have great parents who have a great vision for their kids, and you have one of those kids go off the deep end.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
There's no real explanation for that, because maybe he had good parenting or she had good parenting, and all the skills were given to that person to grow up to be a productive human being. And yet, for whatever reason, they either get in with the wrong crowd or they're influenced in a certain direction, and they head south.
Yeah. So when you say that, like, I made it easy, for you guys to parent me or whatever, I mean, I know you're saying, like, part of that is DNA, but do you think part of it is also, like, your parenting early on?
I would say possibly so, but I think, the old saying, that a lot of lessons are caught and not so much taught.
Yes.
And so I think a person can teach by example. And, of course, you were in a working class family where Mom and Dad both were working, holding down jobs.
Yeah.
It's not like we had to preach to you or Rye about the work ethic.
Yeah.
You guys picked it up.
Yeah.
And you ran with it. And so, I think that's part of where you are today, is because not so much we harped on you, because I don't feel we never pushed the lawyering or anything like that.
Right.
We wanted you and your brother to find your niche in life.
Yeah.
And we wanted to be there to facilitate that, but we weren't going to be there to pressure you into anything like that.
Right.
So I think part of that, is, you're a driven person. I'm driven. Your mom is driven in certain respects also.
Yeah.
Okay. And Rye was too.
Yeah.
So some of that is DNA. It's not something you can learn. It's in you.
Yeah.
So when I say that you made it easy, you were strong-willed, and you always wanted to have the last word, okay? But at the same time, you were a unique individual, not just a daughter, but a human being that knew very early on what they wanted out of life. And that's very unique with anybody.
Yeah.
You're one of the few people that I have found that had a vision and stuck with that vision and wasn't wishy-washy and went back and forth.
Yeah.
And changed their mind and
Right.
let's try that and try that,
Yeah.
kind of thing. So
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel, I don't know how or why that happened, but, I feel lucky that it happened.
yeah.
So when you, were you ever, like, did you ever have any, as I was, like, growing up and, becoming, like, I remember you used to always use the term, like, you're becoming a young lady. And, like, you kind of grow up and come into your own and start dating and, that kind of thing. I mean, did you ever, how did you teach me to, like, choose solid men?
And again, I think that you made that easy for us too. I don't think we had a vision of who you should be with. Obviously, if you were with someone that we felt was not in the best interest of you,
Yeah.
we would have spoken up.
Yeah.
Did
you ever think that about any of, like, my boyfriends or anything? Like, oof, this is not a good one.
Not in the same respect like what you're thinking. I don't think any of the boys that you went out with were, harmful to you as far as that part of it. There may have been a couple that, like, were thinking, as parents would, just like you will be with your daughters in the not too distant future.
Right.
Like, I hope that that person has my daughter's or my son's best interest in mind or whatever.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So there was that.
Oh, we're all, like, a hot mess to some extent, So, but I do feel like all the men that I chose in my life were, like, solid human beings, Would you agree?
I would agree.
Yeah. And like, I really, as I was telling Aaron in the intro, like, I can't really ever say that I was in, like, a toxic relationship or that I had, like, a toxic boyfriend.
Yeah.
And I feel that that's kind of, like, unusual. I mean, usually everyone has someone that they're like, oh God, that was a bad time in my life, And so I wonder, like, man, how did I escape life, without that? What went on in my childhood where it just gave me, like, a really good compass to choose solid humans and friends too, really, not just men. Like, when I'm still best friends with all my best friends from preschool.
Yeah.
And they're all, like, really super solid people. However life ebbs and flows in terms of, like, you're close now or, you're not as close now as you used to be or whatever, like, really everyone in my life, friends, boyfriends, whatever, have, like, been really solid human beings, I feel. And so I kind of wonder, like, what did you guys do? What was the secret sauce, because that's what we, as a parent myself now, it's like, that's what you hope for your kids is, like, okay, they're just going to have, like, a super solid core group of friends. They're going to make good choices on a romantic partner that is, like, solid human beings. I think that's, like, the goal. They're going to choose a solid purpose and meaning for their life through career or whatever the case may be. So it's like, what as a parent should you do to kind of, like, up your chances of your kids being that way?
Well, I mean, that discernment, I think I'll give that credit to your mom because she, I think, has good judgment about people. That's why she married me. Anyway.
Dad, were you planning that joke ahead of time?
Touche.
Well done, sir. Well done.
Anyway, Mom does have good judgment
I think
and
Mom
good
has,
insight.
Mom has good insight and discernment about people. And so I think a lot of that does come. And there again, you kind of go back to the DNA thing. You know what I mean? But the influences, I think so much of it was just caught. I mean, you guys, we were not a family that was big vacationers. I mean, we spent a lot of time at home, except
Yeah.
for when
Well,
we run
pulling weeds. That's all we ever did was pull weeds.
or move firewood.
Stack firewood, cut firewood, move
So
firewood, pull weeds.
It was very basic, you know. I mean, we've had a great life and everything, but it has not been on the high end of things. Okay, so there was a lot of time spent at home unless we were at a ski race or a swim meet or whatever the case may be for you guys.
Right.
But so I think it was a lot of that was caught along the way. It wasn't necessarily like we had this list of things that we're going to pound into your guys' head.
Yeah.
Because it just doesn't work that way. I don't think.
Mm-hmm.
So I think a lot of it was just the environment that you kids were brought up in. And because I've always felt you're basically, you're an old soul.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Oh.
You have a very exquisite life and existence, and you've done really well with what you have accomplished in your lifetime so far. It's amazing.
Thank you.
And we're extremely proud of you. But I think down deep, you're an old soul. Okay, I think you're kind of an old-fashioned girl and that's what gives you that foundation for the basics. You know, getting it done, being a person of your word. Okay, sticking with what you said you were going to do and following through.
Yeah.
And I think those are all things that help you accomplish the things in life that you have accomplished so far.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so I lost my train of thought. What was I going to ask you? Oh, this is what I was going to ask you. Okay, so the conversation we started having in the kitchen last night was you were having dinner with your neighbors, and your neighbor was talking about like his upbringing of his daughters and how, you know, they experienced some difficulties and some challenges. And he asked you, like, well, what did you do different? But before you got to your answer, I was like, Dad, wait, save it for the podcast. So what was your answer to him when he asked you, like, Steve, what did you do different?
Well, I think, you know, I think to make a long story short, okay, I think we let you and Rye marinate somewhat, to use Mom's term, and find your own niche and experience your own successes and failures. And as you probably remember growing up, I was a big person about let these kids fail.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Okay, let them fail. All right. Be there, move their wings for them to get them back up off the ground, but don't fly for them.
Right.
All right. And I think our good friends now, our neighbors, possibly maybe they tried. And I don't know. Okay, but possibly, you know, we have a tendency to want to protect our kids and do it for them.
Right.
Okay, and lift them up and fly for them, and I think that creates a lot of issues, you know. But I am certainly not an expert in any of this. We just, you know, flew by the seat of our pants basically, and prayed to God that, you know, that everything would work. And for the most part, it did work, and we're grateful for that and for the opportunity to have a family, to raise a family where we could raise them and how we did, you know.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. So as different as, let's just say, your life is today from what you grew up with, I think basically you're still that same girl in that old soul costume.
I just drive a Bentley now.
It was a Ford Focus.
Yes. So is there anything that you would have done different parenting?
As far as your upbringing, you mean?
Yes.
I think we could have been brought God into the picture a little bit more than what we did. Growing up Catholic, you know, I always felt that duty and the obligation to make sure you guys would get your catechism and go to church, that kind of a thing. But it was more of a duty call than it was a relationship with God. And so, especially after Rye died, I mean, things changed a lot with us as far as, when I say us, I'm speaking for Mom too, because I think
Yeah.
it did too. But our relationship with God grew way, way deeper, more intense. And I think, I wish that we would have had maybe a little bit more of that on-board personal relationship with, as you guys were growing up, than just the duty call of going to church, getting your first communion,
Yeah.
confirmation, the list of organized religion,
Right.
duties, you might say.
Interesting.
So
Okay.
I think that's the only thing really that I wish would have, we would have gotten into that relationship part of that part of, our
Yeah.
relationship with God earlier than what we did.
Yeah.
It took a tragedy to really kind of
Right.
bring us,
Yeah.
to that point. And so I think that's the only thing that I feel that I wish was different.
Okay. If a young father came up to you today and was like, Steve, like, what are the top 3 things I should be, focusing on or be careful about? Like, what advice would you give to fathers today?
Well, okay, and I gave you this advice too a long time ago. I said, you can't be friends with your children when you're raising them.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't mean you have to be their enemy, but because I think they need that structure and they need to know who's in charge.
Yeah.
Okay, it doesn't mean you have to be, a dictator, but
Right.
it just means that they need to know their role.
Yeah.
Okay, just
Yeah.
like the parents need to know their role
Right.
at that particular time in life, because that role changes. Our role with our
Yeah.
kids has changed, obviously. Now being grandparents, and
Yeah.
now we're becoming invisible. Anyway,
No.
so and then I think the other thing too is, and I've always condoned, that just be patient. You'll find your niche. Okay, don't try and be in a hurry to find out really who you are, because so many things happen in life. A phone call can change your life.
Yeah.
Walking through a door
Right.
opening and meeting someone can change your life.
Yeah.
Okay,
That's very
and
true.
in just in a heartbeat. Okay, your direction in life has changed, and you're going down a different road. So just be patient. You'll find your niche. I watch our grandkids, your girls now.
Yeah.
And I'm watching them closely just to find out, what direction are they thinking? Where are they going? And they're young yet. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? They're
yeah.
very young yet. But it's interesting to watch the development and the growth
Yeah.
of human beings and where you end up.
Right. That is very interesting. How irritating is it to be a grandparent not approving of how your kids are raising their kids?
This is for another podcast, right? It's very, very frustrating. It's very frustrating. I will tell you that
Yeah.
right now. It is. I've often told Mom that it's much harder being a grandparent than it is a parent,
Yeah, I figured you'd say that.
because and not that you think that everyone else is doing everything wrong, but it's a different world.
Yeah.
And so it's hard for older people like us to recognize that it's a different world.
Right.
And to come to grips with, hey, things are different now,
Yeah.
But because we want to hold on to the old,
Yeah.
and it worked for us, why can't it work for them?
Right.
Kind of thing, And so it is difficult to not, and Mom and I've had hours of discussion about this very subject, because, it's a difficult thing,
Yeah.
to sit back and watch what's going on. There's a lot of things we're very proud of, and there's some things we wish were different, which is I think it's a normal thing to see,
Yeah.
But I hope that answers your question.
As a grandparent, like, do you think it's better to stay out of it? Or, I mean, I think, you're better at like not, telling us how disapproved you feel than Mom is. So I'm thinking you feel like it's better to err on the side of like, just let them raise their kids how they see fit versus like intervening.
I do.
Okay.
I do. I mean, unless I saw something that was abusive or something like
Yeah.
that. But I mean, no, because it's a different world doesn't mean it's wrong.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, it's just different.
Yeah.
And so I do think that it's better. Now if you were to come and ask me, point blank,
Yeah.
then I would tell you.
Right.
But to just sit around and come up with things that you think should be different, I don't think it's constructive at all.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Dad, thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yes.
It's been great, and you're a great gal, and we're very proud of you and what you've accomplished, and more than that, who you are.
Thank you.
So thank you.
Dad.
Appreciate that.
I've got just a little bit more to say. That was a really fun conversation to have with my dad. And I have to say, it just dawned on me, him and I have never actually really had that conversation before. And I didn't really plan out my questions. I didn't really know what I was going to ask him. I knew we were going to kind of talk about the issue of daddy issues, but I just kind of let it go from there. And I think my biggest takeaway that I want to share with you all is have the same conversation with your parents. You never know what they're going to say. And my dad said some really flattering things to me that I didn't know he was going to say. And so sometimes, even though I don't feel like there's anything that really needs to be healed in my father-daughter relationship with him, it was really almost therapeutic to have that conversation. So I encourage you to do the same thing with your parents. And I also encourage you to never, ever forget you were made for more. I didn't, though. I didn't. Boom. Record still perfect. Just kidding.